Um, I'm going to cut this as a monologue, and I'm going to go through several other stories since the 8 o'clock hour is effectively ours to hang out. Why is Trump doing this? And what I mean by doing this, why is Trump all of a sudden, in a very panicky way, I'm sitting with Wickoff, and we're going to have a meeting, and now we're going to have a Trump and Putin meeting. And just so happened to take place, when Trump is putting tariffs on the entire world, there's this. And B, when the secondary tariffs that are supposed to come into effect are supposed to come into effect today, meaning the secondary tariffs for China, India, and whoever else is buying Russian oil are supposed to come into effect today. Now, I've told you on more than one occasion, do it. Why wait 10 days? Do it. I'm super interested in seeing it take place. The United States is supposed to be in negotiations with China and India, but the negotiations with India are over with because the U.S. has been putting more and more sanctions on India. But they've done this to Brazil with its 50%. It's not a coincidence that they've been going after effectively BRIC countries as they go about doing this. When India came back with their slap response, they pointed out the level of hypocrisy in you putting these sanctions on us is outrageous. Modi has been out saying our sovereignty is not for sale. India has sent representatives to Russia. They're going to be meeting with China. The BRICS nations have responded to this by closing the wagons. Our sovereignty is not for sale. We see what you're doing. Now, the reality of it is that those sanctions weren't just going to hit Russia. They were also going to throw America's economy into turmoil. And why would it throw America's economy into turmoil? Because we pay for it. We pay for it. All the goods that are coming into this country from India, all the goods that are coming into this country from China, if you're putting sanctions that are 100% on those goods, we pay for that. The importer pays for that. And the importer doesn't just sit there and say, okay, well, we're going to absorb this cost. They pass it on to Americans. That's assuming that they continue to sell the product to America at all, which either means empty shelves or higher prices for the items that you buy. It is not billions of dollars coming into America. For us, it is us paying for all of those items at a markup, meaning we are paying more. What we're going to see in this country is inflation. And to make the point clear, this is the media reporting on the tariffs that Donald Trump has just put out on the world. And right here, on Wednesday afternoon, Mr. Trump, God, I hate it when they do that. On Wednesday afternoon, Mr. Trump said, I think growth is going to be unprecedented, according to the U.S., was taking in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs. But he said he couldn't provide specific figures for revenues because, quote, we don't even know what the final number is, unquote, regarding tariff rates. Despite the uncertainty, the Trump White House is confident that the onset of his broad tariffs, which provide clarity about the path of the world's largest economy, now the companies understand the direction that the U.S. is headed. The administration believes it can ramp up new investment and jumpstart hiring in ways that can rebalance the U.S. economy's manufacturing power. Not so fast, but so far. There are signs of self-inflicted wounds to America as companies and consumers alike brace for the impact of new taxes, because tariffs are taxes. What the data has shown is that the U.S. economy has changed in April with the president's initial rollout of tariffs, an event that led to market drama negotiation period where Mr. Trump's ultimate decision to start the universal tariffs on Thursday. After April, economic reports showed that hiring began to stall, inflationary pressures crept upward, home values in key markets started to decline, said John Silva, CEO of Dynamic Economic Strategy. Quote, a less productive economy requires fewer workers, Sylvia said in an analysis note. But there is more. The higher tariff prices lower workers' real wages. The economy has become less productive and firms cannot pay the same real wages as before. Actions have consequences. Actions have consequences. And they make the point that these consequences will take place over either months or even years. As I point out, stagflation ahead. You're putting taxes on the American worker. Companies or products are going to become more expensive. And it's not like people's wages are increasing in order to compensate for the increase in prices that you're forcing upon American workers. It's that. That's not even the secondary tariffs, by the way. That is just as tariffs against the rest of the world. So what does it mean when you're going to have to put 100% tariffs on China and India? It means chaos. China has already pointed out that they're not going to take a backseat to the US in regards to tariffs. India has been obstinate in regards to making negotiations with the United States on this issue. Somebody had told Trump wrong information. India's sovereignty as what the number 5 or 6 economy is not for sale. Modi has been making speech after speech after speech, pointing out we will protect our farmers, we will protect our industries. They're not buying it. So if you're Trump and you know that, and you know your bluff just got called, and you've written a check that your ass can't cash, is it coincidental that you all of a sudden, let's make a deal? I need to talk to Putin. We need to make this deal immediately. And not just we need to make this deal immediately, pursuant to that, by the way, of the economic damage that we are dealing with in this country that Donald Trump doesn't want to acknowledge. Militarily, if you've checked out what has been taking place on the battlefield, Ukraine has been getting routed. Reuters came out with an article the other day. I don't know how much attention it got, but it should have gotten more attention. That's effectively pointed out Russia is not wavering and will not be deterred by what Donald Trump is effectively trying to do. And the article points out a few things. This is the first source said that Putin privately concerned. By the way, I don't know who these sources are. I would suspect they're Americans. So take this as an American point of view, not as a Russian point of view. Right here. The first source said Putin was privately concerned about the recent deterioration of the United States ties. Putin still retains the hope that Russia can again befriend America and trade with the West. Quote, he is worried about Trump's irritation, this person said. Okay, we don't know who this person is. I have no idea if that's true. I would say logically, Russia would want to come to some kind of terms, which is the reason why they're accepting Wickoff in the first place. So let's take that. It says right here, Moscow forces advancing on the battlefield in Ukraine under heavy military pressure. Putin does not believe now is the right time to end the war, the sources said, adding that neither the Russian people nor the army would understand if he stops. That is true. When you are winning on the battlefield, it's clear you're winning on the battlefield. It's clear that they're buckling because you're attacking on all fronts. You have 2 or 3 places that are in the process of falling and collapsing as we speak. Chasiv Yar has just fallen. Petrovsk is on the way to falling. Zaporozhye is being attacked. And as Arnold said, they're about to cross attack the Dnieper. Kherson looks like it's going to be split in half. That's not a recipe for success from the standpoint of the Ukrainians. While Russia is adding like 30,000 people a month, Ukraine is out there grabbing Domino's pizza delivery drivers and people walking their dog and press gang them forcibly into the military, or for that matter, having fistfights with people as they try to save those people from being thrown into a meat grinder. These are 2 different worlds. These are 2 different realities. And whether Donald Trump has a coloring book that shows him that reality, or whether people around him knows it, it is not a coincidence that this meeting is being drawn. Now, the question becomes, what is this meeting about? Now, one last point, political chaos. Was Russia the picture of stability? Ukraine is a picture of instability, where you have fistfights that are taking place in the Rada. You have people who are out there protesting. You have people who seemingly are making speeches against Zelensky at this point, meaning all of these things are taking place simultaneously, where there's a huge amount of pressure, not just on the Ukrainian political system, but also on the Ukrainian military. There's another quote in this that is fascinating. And again, this is not, I don't believe for a moment this is coming from Russian sources. I suspect that these are coming from American analysts who are trying to put words into Putin's mouth, or for that matter, general's mouth. But it says right here, Russia's military general staff has told Putin that the Ukrainian front will crumble in 2 to 3 months, the first person said. Again, I have no idea who this first person is. But if indeed they're thinking about this from the Russian perspective, then ultimately this is the American perspective of what the Russians think. And considering the pressure that is on the Ukrainian military. I don't know if it's 2 or 3 months, but obviously the level of stress that they're enduring is unfathomable. So if you're Donald Trump, you see political chaos. You see chaos from the standpoint of the military where it's getting pressured to the breaking point. And you know you've just written a check by effectively saying, I'm going to put secondary sanctions, something that you know is going to have a feedback or reverberation on the American economy that is in tandem with the other tariffs that you put on the rest of the world that is also going to have an effect on the American economy. Would that incentivize you to try to make a deal? Yes. Now, Yushikov, when he made the statement, RT is reporting it in a very particular way. And maybe they got it wrong, but it says Russia has received a, quote, acceptable offer from the United States on settling the Ukraine conflict. Now, it could be that what they were accepting was format, not conflict. Those are two different things. It's one thing to say, Trump made an offer, and we like that offer. And so we're going to have a conversation about the boundaries and everything else, and we're going to have a conversation about ending the war. Trump made an offer that we would accept in regards to the format of a meeting where we can have a conversation about all sorts of things, Ukraine being one of those things. Those are two very different conversations. When Yushikov was pressed on this and asked, he said this, which again is not exactly talking about ending the war. It sounded more like format.
Хотя оно было предложение со стороны американцев, которое нам представляется вполне приемлемым.
А где возможное место встречи какое?
Но я пока не могу.
See, right there, there was a proposal by the Americans that we believe was quite acceptable. Is he talking about the war? I don't know.
Говорить, хотя оно, в принципе, определено.
Считанные дни, это значит тоже на следующей неделе? Вы же сказали дни, а не недели.
Ориентировочно, да, на следующей неделе. Было предложение.
It's like, okay, we're going to have a meeting, tentatively days, maybe weeks, but we're going to meet. All right. Move over to Trump for a moment, and they're asking Trump, well, hey, Trump, the ceasefire is supposed to be implemented tomorrow. You're going to pass the secondary sanctions tomorrow in the way that you said, since you're supposed to be having a conversation with the Russians. Oh, don't do this. I hate it when it does it. Let's try this again. Come on, 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 come on.
Agreeing to a ceasefire still stand tomorrow? Is that fluid now that the talks are? What? Is your deadline still standing for Vladimir Putin to agree to a ceasefire tomorrow, or is that fluid now?
It's going to be up to him.
It's going to be up to him. I don't know what that means. Maybe he means, well, if he has a ceasefire, the sanctions don't go into play. Maybe it's that. But the reality of it is, Trump could also be thinking, well, we're going to have talks immediately. Because one of the things that was pointed out was the speed at which Donald Trump wanted to effectively have this meeting with Vladimir Putin. Okay. If you can come to some sort of deal, even if it's not ending the war or ceasefire, you may be able to save face and say, hey, we got this proposal. We're going to accept this proposal, even though it's not ending the war. It may be something more minor. Maybe we're not going to fire drones. Maybe we're not going to fire at cities, whatever that is. And Trump will say, this is my success. This is successful. So because it's successful, we don't have to do the secondary sanctions now that would damage our economy, meaning a face-saving mechanism. Or Trump could go and get told no to his face if indeed he doesn't necessarily have a proposal that would be valid. I suspect, though, that all things being equal, Donald Trump wants a win. And because he wants a win, there may be something that they agree upon where Trump walks out and acts as if it's some kind of success and some kind of win. Now, this is secondary from what is taking place with India, potentially, because Donald Trump seems to have focused his eye now on India, which, from my point of view, is great. The fastest way for you to push India into the arms of Russia and China, this was the most American-friendly component of BRICS, is to do what Donald Trump is doing right now, which is why India has been moving closer and closer to China, closer to Russia, closer to Brazil, etc. So there's that. The other thing is Rubio. Rubio came out with a statement and said this, which, again, take it with a grain of salt because they put out these type of statements before. But Rubio is saying we are closer to a deal now than we've ever been. Again, I don't know what that means, but I'll let you hear Rubio make his point.
I think what we have is a better understanding of the conditions under which Russia would be prepared to end the war. We now have to compare that to what the Ukrainians and our European allies, but the Ukrainians primarily, of course, are willing to accept. And what you try to see is how far can you get these two positions closer? How can you get these two positions closer to each other? If we can get what the Ukrainians will accept and what the Russians will accept close enough, then I think there's the opportunity for the president to have a meeting that includes both Putin and Zelensky to try to close this thing out. So we got to get closer in that regard. But I think for the first time, perhaps since this administration began, we have some concrete examples of the kinds of things that Russia would ask for in order to end the war. We haven't had much of that to this point. Obviously, the Ukrainians have a say in this. We got to bring the two sides and the two positions close enough so that, you know, the ultimate closer, President Trump, can get involved and make it happen.
Now, this is nonsense. This is nonsense, right? Russia and Putin and everybody in that administration has been very clear on their demands from the beginning of this conflict to now. There's been very little deviation. The only deviation that I'm aware of is on the issue of the ceasefire. Russia has said on more than one occasion, we are willing to go for a ceasefire if Ukraine moves its people out of the regions that we have put in the context of the Russian Constitution, no NATO expansion, stop giving them intelligence. We're willing to have a ceasefire and continue the talks in regards to the larger European security issue. They've not deviated from that. They've been very clear. So for Rubio to be like, yeah, we don't know what they wanted. I mean, they've just been all over the place. Nonsense. Complete nonsense. As I point out, the pressure point that's probably taking place here is that the Ukrainian military, A, is collapsing or crumbling, as Mark Sloboda would say, and B, there's political chaos in Ukraine. There's that. The other part to this is something that Rubio said, which is right. Will Ukraine accept it? Now, Zelensky, who knows his military is collapsing, who knows the political process is difficult for him at this moment, came out and said this, which, again, I don't quite know what it means in practice. He says in a post on Telegram on Thursday, the Ukrainian leader said that he had spoken with German Chancellor Merz. I have no idea why. Germany and Europeans are worthless, but whatever. He described it as a, quote, what he wants is a dignified peace. Basically, he wants to end the conflict with a, quote, dignified peace that would determine the security conditions for Europe for decades. Potential formats for meeting for peace on the level of leaders in the near future, including bilateral and trilateral framework. Now, Russia's not going to do this. They're not going to have meetings with Zelensky. One is A, they consider him illegitimate. B, any deal you make with an illegitimate leader can be blown away by the next leader that comes into play. C, they are not going to have any kind of deal or meeting with Zelensky unless certain things are already worked out. Meaning, we are going into this meeting with this being the boundaries of this meeting. If you can't make the boundaries of the meeting is not going to take place. So there's that. The other part to this, I think there's one more part to this, is Ukrainian public. So when Gallup did a polling of the Ukrainian public, hey, what do you want? What do you want? Do you want to keep the war going or do you want the war to stop? 69% said stop the war. 69%. In the very beginning, it was over 70% that wanted the war, or the very least were up and ante, like, up and at it for the war. That has dropped to 24%. Whereas now you have 69% say stop, make peace, make a deal. We're sick of this war. We need to negotiate. We need to get out of this situation. So the political chaos that's taking place in Ukraine, obviously on some level, is also being determined by the number of people who say stop the war, the low morale, the press ganging people, the fights that are taking place on the streets, the fights that are taking place in parliament, the angry parliamentary members saying we're going to be a colony if we effectively don't get rid of these political instruments that the West have put into play. They know it. I don't think it's entirely a coincidence By the same token, I have no idea what they have agreed upon because they're being very tight-lipped about what was offered. The other question to this is Putin. Again, I go back to my original thing and I'll close it on this. Oftentimes when leaders are putting out demands, they're maximalists. Now, I think the Reuters thing is right that it would be very hard for Putin effectively to stop without having those oblasts to be part of the Russian Federation. By the same token, it's become clear at this point that if they keep the war going, then they will take 6 and 8 and etc. Ukraine has to know it. They also have to know that conditions on the ground are getting worse and that the speed of the Russian advance are getting worse. Now, the objective of this war was to create a situation for Russia that is safe, meaning they're chasing safety in regards to this military campaign. If they can get something that would give them that safety, but give up something else, would they do it? Now the catch is, what is something else that they will give up? I don't know. That's the catch. Russia's demands have been pretty straightforward and been steady the entire way through. So I don't know what they would give up in order to come up with a solution in order to end the conflict. Maybe they would be willing to freeze the lines. Maybe, who knows? Even though they may say all the Ukrainian troops need to leave these areas, they may be flexible about what these areas actually mean. I don't know, but we'll see. I think a lot of this depends upon what the Trump administration is willing to accept or what they're willing to come away with saying this is what we considered a win, what they're willing to effectively give up. And is Donald Trump willing to give up enough for Putin to accept some kind of deal? I don't know. I don't know. All of these things are just questions that are looming over top of these negotiations. It is very possible that Trump comes out with something minor and calls it a win. It may even be possible that the US president is like, look, I'm sick of this war. I want to pivot to somewhere else. So yes, I'm willing to give the Russian president this amount. And the Russian president says, I'm willing to accept this amount. We call this a day. I have no idea. Yes, this is a lot of wood to chop to say, I have no idea. But that's the only honest assessment that I can really come away with. All things being equal, these negotiations are going to take place relatively soon. And we will see what they come out with at the end of it. I will tell you, I'm sick of this war. These people are dying for senseless reasons. And at some point, there will be a reckoning where people at the end of it all, where they've lost, 25, 30% of their territory, where they've lost 1.5 million people, 1.2 million people, where you have all of these people who have effectively been injured and damaged. You have all of these women who are working in the sex industry. You have all of these people that have fled Ukraine, turning it into somewhat of a dying nation. You've lost all of this productive land that could have used for tech sector, or for that matter, rare earth minerals or lithium or whatever else. And they would ask, what was this for? What was this for? That is a damning question. That is a damning question. We'll see. This is going to take place, next week, give or take? And depending upon what they come out with, either the war continues, Trump is going to have to put in secondary sanctions, which again is going to have a reverberation effect on the US economy. We'll see. Some people are asking, well, why would Russia negotiate now? Well, again, Russia was always willing to negotiate. They said it from the very beginning. But the negotiation had to take into account the reality on the ground, facts on the ground. And facts on the ground is the Ukrainian military is getting weaker. Now, the thing to look for is whether or not the Trump administration lies. And what I mean by that is if Trump is making the argument that Russia has lost 120,000 people over the course of the year, then they are lying. And if they're lying, that means they are not trying to get a deal. You get a deal with being honest. You don't get a deal with being dishonest in your assessment of what is taking place on the ground and what is taking place in regards to the war itself. We will see. We will